Hi, my name's Keith Cooper from Northlight Images, and in this short video I'm going to explain a little bit about why I play around with old lenses. Sorry, I mean why I make use of adapted lenses in my photography. No, it really is just play around with old lenses. If you've never tried taking old lenses, putting them on a new camera, might be something fun to try. Now, I've been doing this for years, and there's a link with this video which goes to a list of all the different ones I've tried. It's got lots more pictures and various details on it. I'm not going to go into details of different lenses. This is really about the principle of adapting lenses, and it's quite simple really, in that if you take a camera, and this one's 5DS DSLR, there is a distance between here, the end of the camera, and where the sensor is, and that's called the flange distance. Now that varies by different make and model of camera, and there's also the question that the actual mount is different. Now, a lot of people think, when they think about putting lenses on different cameras, oh, the fitting is different. Well, yes, the fitting is different, but also the flange distance required for the lens. I can show that in an example here. Here's a Canon, and normally the lens would go right up against it. This is an EF mount. However, this lens is from a Mamiya 645 camera. That has a larger flange distance, so that means the lens needs to be held further away from the sensor in the camera, and that's what the adapter does. It also adapts between the mechanical fitting of the Mamiya lens and the mechanical fitting of the Canon EF lens mount. Now, that's a simple dumb adapter, and in fact most adapters you'll find have no electronics in them. There are adapters with electronics in them. They tend to be much more expensive. Autofocus is something you also don't get on these old lenses. In fact, all of these lenses here predate autofocus on cameras. The depth between the lens flange distance and the body flange distance, as long as that is a positive distance, you can put the adapter in. Now, this example here, this shows the difference between this, an EF mount, and an RF mount, a modern Canon mirrorless camera. So you can see that the adapter on the right, which is a shift adapter, and I've done a lot about using shift, and this is a simple way of using shift. This is a shift adapter for Mamiya lenses to EF mount. It's quite thin. If you look at the much larger adapter on the left hand side, that's the photodiox adapter that I've covered in another video, because it's a very useful adapter. There it is there on a Mamiya 55mm lens, which I'm going to be doing a video about using this lens in due course. So anyway, the adapter does a little bit more than just fill the space between the lens and the camera. It does mean that some cameras, if the flange distance of the lens is less than the camera body, you can't put an adapter because it needs like a negative distance, and that doesn't work very well. There are ways around it, and they tend to involve modifying the lens and various other things, but no, it's not a problem. One thing I should say is that with mirrorless cameras, because these lenses are all manual focus, the focus screens in DSLRs are not that great necessarily for manual focus lenses. I find it much easier to use adapted lenses on mirrorless cameras, and in fact I'm shooting this video using a Canon EOS RP, and the lens I'm using on it is an Olympus 24mm f2.8. Now here's another one that I have. So this lens from the 1980s, excellent lens. I have it on an adapter, and that's what I use for shooting all my videos. Just happens to be a nice convenient 24mm lens. Good quality, fully manual settings, has an aperture ring on it, so when the sun comes out I can think, oh, it's a bit bright, and just reduce the exposure with that, because auto doesn't work very well. But this lens is fully manual focus, manual aperture setting. You have to get to know how to use aperture and focus. And in many ways, one of the real benefits to your photography is in having to go back to using manual focus, manual aperture, manual setting of exposure. It may not be the greatest things for action photography, but it is really good for improving your general understanding of light. Photography is about light, and we have so many auto features on cameras these days that it's easy to forget about it. Now, I'm not saying you should abandon all your cameras and just go, oh, I want to use manual focus all the time and that. It can be a pain on times, but in thinking about depth of field, aperture setting, focus, exposure, ISO setting, in thinking more about that during your photography when you're using lenses like this, it actually has benefits elsewhere, because even if you don't need to know that, it sticks. It means that in a lot of my professional photography, I work fully manual. There's no exposure meter. I do some metering. If the light doesn't change, the exposure doesn't need to change. It's a simple one like that. But anyway, here are some lenses, and so I've got articles on many of these, and I'll try and do some videos on some in due course when we can get out and about again. But there's an adapter. Now, the particular example here is a Soligor lens, 300mm, f5.5. This lens probably dates from the 1970s. It's 300mm telephoto lens. It has manual setting of aperture. You need to set the aperture on it to use it. You tend to focus, normally with a DSLR, you'd focus with the lens fully open at its widest aperture and then stop down. However, with the focusing on mirrorless cameras, you can often use something like focus peaking or something like that, and it makes a lens like this so much easier to use on a mirrorless camera when you can actually see the sharpness in the viewfinder. But anyway, this particular lens is a T-thread lens. It's quite a common thread adapter. I've got loads of links on the website to details about that old lens you found in a junk shop somewhere, or a relative gave you when they were having a clear out, how to identify the mount and various things like that. But this has got a T-thread on it, so it has an adapter on that to go to M42, which is a screw thread that's quite popular a few years back in film days. So that's the M42 screw thread. Now, M42 screw thread won't fit my camera. However, I've got an EF to M42 adapter, and that's this adapter here. That's a fairly small, thin, just plain metal adapter. That adapter goes from this to EF mount. And of course, if I'm using the lens on the EOS RP, then I've got another adapter from EF to RF. Now, you may hear some people going, oh, you can't read these adapters, they cause problems, etc, etc. Yeah, maybe they do. I don't care. I've never really noticed them. These are not lenses I generally use for, shall we say, serious work. Not entirely true though, because I do use the photodiox adapter with these Mamiya lenses, and they produce excellent results, because the large format lenses, medium format lenses that I'm using here, have a large image circle, which means they have very good image quality, and the images are very easy to fix. Now, this is with the, this Soligor 300. Use that as just an example. And as I say, do check the articles, because I go into far more detail than I can cover really in a video here, and show details in images. There it is, mounted on the RP. Photograph taken with the Soligor lens on the RP at wide open aperture. Now, I take pictures at wide open aperture when I'm testing these, just to see how bad the optics are on some of these lenses. And some of these lenses, the optics are pretty poor. But that depends on what you want to do with your photographs and what you're using them for. I'm not going to be using this lens for my architectural work because, well, I've got some Canon lenses. They've got image stabilization, much better optics and a wider aperture, so why bother? I find that going out sometimes, just putting a lens on, forcing yourself to use a single manual focus lens, going out taking some photos, just makes you think a bit about shots, makes you think about shots a bit different than you would have got. Give it a go. For example, I was looking at this one here, which is one I've still not got around to covering. This is an old Russian lens, Helios 58mm f2. Apparently this is known for its swirly bokeh, or out of focus blur, and people love it for portrait use. Now, I'm an architectural industrial photographer and I rarely photograph people. I might give it a go. I might take this one with me sometime and give that a go. But anyway, we've got all these lenses here. That's the picture at f5.5. If I look at some of the detail, you can see it's not terribly good. I've actually sharpened the image here using Topaz Sharpen AI, which is one of the best tools I currently have for fixing old lens problems. I use it not perhaps for an image this poor, but I certainly would consider using it for the tilt shift adapter, in using that, particularly if I'm using that with, say, a 35mm lens. Now, the 35 Mamiya, which is this one here on the 5DS, is good, but by modern standards it could do with a bit of sharpening. And it turns out that if you use software like, say, Topaz AI Sharpen, which I've got some detailed reviews of using, if you use that, then you can actually get some quite good results. And I've used it professionally, no problem whatsoever with using it on a 50MP camera and getting usable results. So it gives you an idea. It fixes things, but there's only so much you can do. Obviously the answer is, if you're using a lens like that one there, is to stop it down a bit. So at f8, f11, it performs excellently. I've just taken a photograph here at 5.5 to show what it's actually like. Now, I've got a few more lenses here, so I'm not going to go into all details, but just as an examples of ones I use. An Olympus 50 f1.2. Superb lens to use. I bought it in about 1984, I think. Quite expensive lens. Very nice lens, f1.2. Very difficult to use on a DSLR. Really easy to use on a mirrorless camera, and f1.2 gives a very particular look to your images. 135mm f4.5. Now, this particular one is a Tamron dating from 1963, I believe. The twin telly. I've only got one part of it. This is the basic 135mm lens. Surprisingly good quality from a 135mm lens at that size. There's another one at 135. Now, this particular one is a Zeiss 135 3.5. Now, I have used this because it's very small, convenient, take it with an adapter on the RP, and got some very nice pictures from it. You don't have to use the lenses conventionally. I find the right one here. This is a 28mm f2.8, and it is a Sirius. Who knows? There were a lot of lenses rebadged in the 70s and 80s, and just so you'll find you can usually track them down on the web. There are people even more interested in this stuff than me, far more interested, lots of detail. However, this particular lens is the one I used with an adapter to reverse mount and use as a macro lens. I was able to make a 5x macro lens using this that worked surprisingly well. And in fact, until I actually bought a specific macro lens with 5x macro, this one was I used for quite a bit of experimenting. But anyway, that's it. Hope that's been of interest, give you an idea. Do check the articles and things. They've got lots more photos and examples in. I'm going to be, if people are interested, I'll be doing a few more more general photography things like this. Do let me know. I've got tons of stuff I can cover. I've got this 500mm f8 lens. You can buy these new for about £40. I'd say don't spend that much. But yeah, I've got all of this sort of stuff. Hope it's been of use, and thank you very much.